We're recording.
Okay.
We're live.
Awesome. Okay, great. So thank you all so very much for joining today. This is our very last webinar series with the Plainfield Special Improvement District. I can't believe that the time has flown so quickly. But again, it's flown so quickly, and I'm grateful for the opportunity that we have today to hear from Marcela Zukovicki, who will be sharing the topic of why knowing our financials is important to our business success. So I'm going to be brief because I know we want to hear from Marcela, but I just want to read a little bit about her bio, and then we can begin. Does that sound good to you, Marcela?
Yes, by all means.
Awesome. So let us start here. So Marcela Zukovicki is a wonderful person. I just want to start on my personal note. She is a mentor, a business coach, strategic partner of mine, and I'm so grateful that she is here, like she mentioned, lending us some of her time. So I'm going to just read a little bit of her bio because Marcela is very, I'm going to say expansive in her history, her tenure, her experience, and her professionalism. So a little bit about her professional journey. She graduated and is a mathematician and actuary in Mexico, and she studied at UCLA. Marce became an assistant professor teaching calculus and linear algebra back in the University of Anahuac in Mexico. During that time, she also taught financial computer models for executives at IBM and financial literacy in Mexico. She's fluent in 5 languages. Did you hear that? 5 languages, and has developed multi-million-dollar programs for the National Institute for the Indians in Mexico, UNICEF in Mexico, USA, and Europe, Evaristo Valle Museum in Spain, the Florida West Coast Symphony, now known as the Sarasota Orchestra in Florida, the American Field Service Intercultural Programs in New York, and I'm bringing it down to where she is today and to our current date. So that's early on in her wonderful career. You can see all that she started to do, but she currently is such an expert, pro, and specialist that many universities have called on her. She has had experience in the UN. She has received accolades. I know I experienced knowing Marcela from the Entrepreneurship Pioneer Initiative program at Rutgers University Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. She is a founder of Jalima and Associates, a virtual CFO bookkeeping and strategic advisory company that provides integrated, cost-effective CFO and bookkeeping services, as well as strategic planning to small, medium, and large-sized companies worldwide. With no more from myself, I'd like to introduce you to some and present to all Marcela Andrea Zukovicki.
Thank you, Bertha. Wow, that bio tells that I'm really old. That's all that it tells, man. But please, all of you, call me Mars. I like to be called by that name. Everybody calls me Mars. It makes it more intimate. And because we're such an intimate group, what I like to know, maybe from you, Bertha, or if people want to unmute themselves, if I can first know which is my audience, to whom am I talking to? Because depending to whom am I talking with, the conversation will steer in one direction or another.
Phenomenal. I think that's great. So if we can go around, we have Eric on the line.
Yes. Hello, how is everybody?
Good, how are you, Eric? Can you give us a little bit about your background and what drew you to Marcela's conversation today, or Marce's conversation today?
So basically, I have a screen printing and embroidery business in Plainfield, and I recently started following the SID on social media, and today the topic drew my attention regarding the knowing your financials.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Arturo Marroquin?
Yeah, how you doing? How are you? My name is Arturo Marroquin. I have a couple of business in Plainfield. I started in 2008. And then my goal is always, increase my intelligence, so that's why we here, to hearing for Marcela, and trying to learn as much I can.
Excellent. Good to see you and hear you again, Arturo. And then I know that Joel had to step away, but we have a Galaxy S9. If you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself. Okay, so maybe if you have, if you're unable to, it's okay. We will continue, Marcela, with your presentation.
All right. So basically, the members that are participating in today's meeting are small business entrepreneurs. And the United States economy and its growth, it's all populated by small businesses. That's kind of like the guiding principles of the economy. But small businesses, most of the times, are not able to scale or to be able to sustain themselves because they're not organized financially. There are other reasons why they cannot sustain themselves and scale. But I would say that the number one reason why they cannot do that is because they don't know their finances. And one of the reasons that happens is because when you start a business, you hire the CPA, which is very important to have, very, very important to have a CPA. But the role of the CPA is managing your taxes, being in contact with the government and making sure that you're doing your tax returns and those tax returns are being done properly. Now, the challenge with that is that managing your business for your tax return is not understanding your financials, and it's not understanding how to run a business. And in order to be able to sustain and grow a business, you need to have not only the information that's available on your bank account, you need to have the information of what you have. If you mentioned, one of you, that you have an embroidery business. If you have inventory, how much inventory you have of that, how are you managing your inventory? You need to have also who's owing you money. You need to be able to invoice people, or if you don't invoice people, have sales activities. You need to create a series of activities that will allow you to really understand your day-to-day operations. And if you don't have a thumb on what that is, you'll never be able to scale and grow your business. Now, I'm going to ask this question to anybody who wants to answer. If you go to your bank account and you look how much money you have in your bank account, is that how much money you have on your business?
No.
And why not?
Because that doesn't tell the total picture.
But what is missing there? Let's talk about it. If you're already selling products and you are paying your vendors, and you looked at in the bank account you have $1,000, is that how much? You already answered the question. You don't have $1,000, but why? If anybody wants to mention why you don't have $1,000, or do you have more, or you have less, or you have that? Anybody wants to try to answer that question?
Expenses, prepaid expenses.
Right. So exactly. So you guys know basically the guiding principles. What's in the bank doesn't tell you how much money you have to pay for people that you haven't paid. And so you cannot use that money until you are fiscally responsible and you're paying who you need to pay for. And also, maybe you haven't received all the money that you're supposed to be getting. And if you had a proper accounting process, it will tell you by the following week how much money you would be getting, because there were all these people that were supposed to pay you in a week, but the bank account doesn't know that. So if you're planning and you want to, excuse me, I need to sneeze. I think it's gonna go away. Phew, I'm sorry. I apologize. But so if you understand your numbers and you're able to quantify all the information that you have there, that will allow you to give you an absolute full picture of your finances and how your finances are being managed. So to start to do that kind of activity, how do we do that? So we need to be able to quantify everything that we have in our business. So you have to identify which would be your stakeholders and who would be your key stakeholders. So your key holders would be, one would be your banking institutions, and you need to be able to capture how much you have in bank accounts or savings accounts, but you also need to capture if you have credit cards and how you're using your credit cards. That's like one of your banking institutions and your credit card institutions, which are managed most likely by a bank, would be your number one stakeholder. Then you have all your customers. You have to create profiles and you have to know who they are. If you are a mom and pop store that you're doing cash retail services, wouldn't it be nice if you have the person who comes to your register, nowadays they're called point of service, point of sale, POSs instead of cash registers. And wouldn't it be fantastic if you had the ability to look at an indication of what they have been buying before, what is their trend, what do they like, so you can build a relationship even if they come to your store and leave your store. You have to be able to have the ability to create best practices that kind of customer service, customer balance, it's being managed by you understanding how much money it comes from each one of them that are participating. Now, once you scale, you have to use it differently because, like, if you're a grocery store and you have thousands of different businesses, then not businesses, individuals that are coming to your grocery store, you still have the technology and the ability to be able to find out how much spending they are doing, how they're doing, so they get promotions, they get all kinds of activities. So you do need to understand that, and the only way you can understand it is by managing by the numbers. Now, I'm an advocate of a book that every time that I give a presentation, I tell people to buy or to get it from a public library. And I'll be happy to also send Bertha a link of how you can access it for free, that it's called Managing by the Numbers. That's a great resource because it's a very easy to read book that will open your eyes if you're not being able to manage by the numbers. Did you read that book, Bertha?
Yes, I did.
And what would you say is the most that you got out of that book?
I would say understanding my reporting. What is cash flow, profit and loss?
Okay. So that is very important. So now that leads to what I wanted to talk next to you. In order to understand your financials, and thank you, Bertha, for participating. In order to understand your financials, you have to be able to see certain reports that tell you the story of your business. And there's three types of reports that are very, very important to know how your business is doing. One of the reports is a balance sheet. In a balance sheet, basically what a balance sheet is telling you how much money do you have, how much money do you owe, and it gives you an overall picture of your financials. It doesn't tell you at all how much money you're making. It just tells you how much money you have. And that is put together by using certain terminology that in an hour we won't be able to dive into it. You need a little bit more participation in knowing, and reading that book, it will allow you to know that. But it will tell you the difference between equity and also what is liabilities, which is liabilities what you owe, what you have, and assets what you have. So there's three major nomenclatures that are equity, assets, and liability, and the balance sheet gives you that. So equity is basically everything that you have ownership on. And an asset is basically everything that you actually possess, but not necessarily own. And a liability is everything that you owe. And the combination of all that information will tell you what a balance sheet is. Now, do you have any questions about what a balance sheet is? Anybody? Okay. So, and thank you for writing in the chat. Yes, I will give you a link in how to get that book for free. So now let's go to the second report that it's so important to understand, and that's a profit and loss. A profit and loss, sometimes it's called also an income statement. So if you hear the definition of profit and loss, or you hear somebody saying an income statement, those are the same type of reports that people just use different terminology to say absolutely the same. And the income statement or profit and loss, the only information that gives you is how much money are you making, and how is that put all together to be able to understand how much money you're making or how much money you're losing. Sometimes you may be losing money. So the way it's put together is by understanding all your income, and that comes from all the sales that you have. And sometimes income can be residual income, sometimes it can be selling a product, a service, any way that you can categorize all that information. And then you add that the expenses that you need to deduct from the incomes, and it will tell you how much money you're making. Now, there's two types of expenses. They're like lumped into different categories. One type of expense is completely related and associated into the income that you're making. For example, if you are going to sell a jam and you buy the jam for somebody else, that income that you're making is whatever you put a price into the jam, but the cost of that product, that jam that you are going to be selling, has a specific cost. It's nothing related to any other type of expense, that the direct expense to that product or the direct expense into a service. For another example, so for example, if Bertha has a series of employees that are facilitating her programs, and she has to pay those people just to facilitate that program, that expense that she has, even though it may be payroll, is directly associated to the service that she's selling. And when you are relating those direct expenses to the product or service that you're giving, those are called costs of goods sold, or cost of doing business, cost of service. So when you see something in a report that says COGS, COGS, that basically what it is that it's an expense associated just directly to the product that you are selling or to the service that you're providing. And the rest of the expenses are all bundled together as general and administrative expenses. So at the end of the day, that report, the profit and loss report, is going to be able to give you how much money you are making, which doesn't tell you how much money you have. Because you could be for example, I could say that I made $100,000 this year. However, nobody paid me. So it doesn't matter if I made $100,000 because nobody paid me. So in the bank, it's $0. So you have to be able to see both reports to be able to know exactly how much money you have made, but also how much money you have in the bank. And the last I'm going to stop for a second. Any questions about the profit and loss or income statement? Have any questions? I see an Oscar, a Teresa. Anybody has questions? All right, I will continue. If you don't have questions, that's great. It means that I'm explaining it very well. But you're welcome to ask questions because there's never a bad question. Now, the last report that it's very important to know, it's your statement of cash flows. That's a fancy name to just saying how much money do you have. Because remember, the balance sheet tells you how much money you owe, how much money you owe, and also how much you have in general altogether. But it sometimes in that balance sheet, you may have things that are not related to money, that are intangible assets, things that you have that not necessarily you could use for cash to do an activity. So the statement of cash flows allows you to find exactly how much money you have that you could use for a specific moment or a specific period to do an activity or to buy or to be able to do payroll, that you know exactly how much you have. Simple as that. Now, sometimes the balance sheet and the cash flows are the same. Sometimes, depending on what information is in there, but not all the time. So you need to know the difference of each one of those. So basically, I spent the first 25 minutes telling you about the importance. So I have said to you, one is the importance of understanding your financials, because what's in the bank not necessarily is what you have or what you need to know for running your business. And secondly, we've talked about the three major reports that I really appreciate. The chat that Bertha is facilitating to talk about that. Now, COGS, cost of goods sold, as you can see it in the chat. A statement of cash flows. Somebody wants to ask a question? I hear somebody unmuting themselves. You're welcome to unmute yourselves and interrupt me and ask any questions you have, because this information is so important and it's not difficult at all, but it's information that you should be able to understand at a very basic level. And I want to make sure that you all understand what I'm saying. So if you want, I can pause again and anybody can ask me a question, be happy to. I'll even turn my camera on so you can all see me.
Good to see you. I have a question, Marce. So let's say I have, no, let me back up. How do I calculate all of these reports? Do I need a specific system in place, or can I do this in an Excel spreadsheet? How do I come up with these easy reports?
So one of the greatest weaknesses that small businesses have is that they try to manage all the financials by using an Excel sheet. An Excel sheet is a very simple type of a flat, static type of statement that you can put a lot of equations and you can calculate a lot of projections out of it, but it also will have the ability for you to make mistakes. The only way you have the ability to be able to really have the right information is by purchasing an accounting software that will allow you to keep your financials organized. Because when you buy a financial software, even though you may not be a CPA or an accountant or a financial person, the software itself, if you organize the software properly and everything has the place where they should be, what happens is that it's kind of a domino effect. When you put information in one place, like you put information about selling something, it will also show that the people owe you the money, and it will also show you in another place. So that way, it combines all the information, but it creates it in a very scalable type of process that all the information has not the ability of making mistakes. Because if you're using best practices and you're able to, and if you're able to do what this financial software is designed to do, you'll never be able to make mistakes. Because one of the things that a financial software has, it has the ability of do a very important task that it's called reconciliation. And reconciliation, what basically is that whatever my bank account tells me that I have spent or I've received in a given month, it has to match what the financial statement, the accounting software says. And if it doesn't match, there's a mistake and you have to fix and you have to find the mistake. Now, when you are using just a CPA to do that kind of activities, what happens is that most of the things that don't match, they're entered as they don't match. I will force it to match, and I will make that match. And when you force things to match, that has a special name that it's called journal entry. And journal entries are designed for huge, larger companies that sometimes their inventory doesn't match and they make things match, or if you have something that you cannot account for, like an appreciation, depreciation, amortization of things, that it has to be entered. But they're not designed for you to put, like, in the bank it says that I have $1,000, but in my books it says that I have $2,000. So I'm gonna put a journal entry saying, well, I'm going to say what the bank says, that I have only $1,000. And that's a journal entry. So now what you have done in an accounting software is forcing everything to match, but without a reason why that is matching. So that's another thing that an accounting software has the ability to provide, is to be able to give you information that it's to the teeth and exactly what it is. So the only way you can do that is if you have ownership of your financials, rather than getting a CPA to have ownership of your financials. You have to have the ability to manage your numbers and to be able to manage everything that you own and everything that you have by yourself, and not delegate that activity to a third party. That doesn't mean that you could not hire somebody and get somebody, a staff, a person that you're hiring to do your bookkeeping or doing your financials, or getting an administrative assistant to do something like that if you cannot do it. The challenge is when you give a CPA the ability to do your taxes and your books at the same time, unless you have a very deep conversation with the CPA saying, whatever you do for my taxes, that is fine, but I want to be able to have exactly by the teeth. I want to know how much money I'm making, how much money I'm expending, if I have inventory, how I'm managing my inventory, that comes into my financial statements, and how that works all together. So you guys know now the difference between managing by the numbers and having a CPA doing your taxes Anybody can paraphrase what I just said? How about you, John? I see you. Do you want to unmute yourself?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think your point is to keep track of what your business is doing, expenditure versus what income or what's coming in. Sort of control that, and then leave the end of year or fiscal year stuff for the CPA, which is filing the taxes and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it gives you sort of control over your business as opposed to somebody else monitoring and telling you what it's doing.
So first of all, what type of business do you have, John?
I do a little bit of everything. So I'm into real estate. So real estate is my primary thing. Rentals, anything involved in real estate.
Okay, so you're in real estate. And how do you manage your day-to-day operations, your finances?
Well, my day-to-day is, I pretty much do my day-to-day. I do use a little bit of spreadsheet stuff. I mean, my operation isn't huge, but I do know what you're talking about because I do have a software engineering background. So I'm pretty, I mean, when it comes to, the automated checks and balances within the software, it beats using a spreadsheet for which you have to copy a book and you replicate the stuff and all that stuff like that. You can move from year to year, month to month, using, just because the software is built to do that. You can add in different features, just like you said, adding a journal in that software is pretty easy. They have an add journal button that lets you do it.
Thank you, John. What about you, Eric? I understand are you the person with the embroidery business? Can you unmute yourself, Eric?
Yes, I use QuickBooks to do my, I guess, my accounting. And for the taxes, I have an accountant separate. But again, QuickBooks, since it's a small business, QuickBooks is enough to be able to handle my needs at this point.
That's fantastic. So what would you, if you're already engaging in best practices, so what would you like to learn out of this 1-hour webinar that you are not doing or that could help you with what you're doing?
That's a good question. No, basically, as far as the reports that you went over, I was pretty familiar with them. I think where we lack a little bit of knowledge is just I got to train my staff better because sometimes they're the ones dealing directly with the customers and they don't use the QuickBooks like in the same way that I do it when I'm there. So I have more of an operational problem more than the knowledge of the QuickBooks itself. I don't know if I'm.
Yeah, you are. So for you, Eric, you probably know this, but you have the ability in your QuickBooks to see an audit log. So you can actually see if you give access to people with different passwords to enter your QuickBooks, you have the ability to see what they're doing and how they're spending their time and how they're putting the information together. So in order to do that, hold one second, guys. I apologize, guys. So in order to do that, you have to give access and passwords to all the people that are participating in your company. Now, another thing that you can do in your QuickBooks is that you give different user rights to different people. So if you don't want everybody to see how much you're making or know exactly how your business is doing, you can have people just doing your invoices. You can do different people doing your bills. So you can train people on different skills. So that way, not everybody has to learn a very robust, complicated system. They can learn just a little piece of a system that it's very easy to use and easy to manage. And by them, they become experts in their piece. And all together with everybody else, you're able to grow your business because you're giving different responsibilities to different people. Does that make sense, Eric?
Yes, that makes perfect sense. I made a note of that. I'll look into the different ways of changing people's access. So yeah, they have to see all the private information.
So just as a tip, because I want to be able to talk to everybody, when you go to, there's two different activities in your QuickBooks. One is a gear, which is in the upper right corner. And if you look at the gear, that is where you can manage everything. And in terms of your staff and everybody that you want to build and change things differently. Now let's go to Arturo. Arturo, do you have something specific that you would like to ask me?
Actually, I use a QuickBooks too, and also I have different users. Like the secretary. He use different users, so it's not everybody can come. To the main system to see everything I'm doing. So I am a little bit familiar. With the spreadsheet. On the QuickBooks.
So how are you using, Arturo, your QuickBooks?
Can you repeat it again? You say how?
Yeah, how do you use it? What information do you enter there?
Okay, we are in the food industry, okay, and also I have a real estate. So I have a different companies, like I have 3 restaurants. So each restaurant, they have their own system, So, some people, they do only invoices, and other people, they pay checks. What I do is just checking everybody, like what they check, like what the checks they give into the people, and checking the invoices. So my job is only to check what everybody doing,
That's very good. Now, I'm adding another piece of information for you, Arturo. So rather than having 3, 4 different QuickBooks, depending on all the business that you have the ability, if you have one EIN for your companies and you're using one only EIN, then you have the ability to have only one QuickBooks and separate them by classes or divisions. And that way you don't spend so much money in doing different bookkeeping for different companies and trying to centralize everything into one. But the only way you can do that if you have one EIN. Is that helpful?
Yes, but I have different EAM because in each business I have different partners. When you have partners, they don't allow to, to have mixing, numbers,
Absolutely.
with other
Absolutely.
people.
Yeah, for that you need to have different accounting software. Now, thank you for participating, Arturo. Now let's see the person who's on Galaxy S9. Do you want to introduce yourself or not? You have to unmute yourself if you want to talk to us. Okay, I will respect your privacy and I will go to Oscar. Oscar, do you want to unmute yourself and tell me about how are you using your financials and what exactly you're doing?
Sure. Hello, Marce. This is the second time that I'm with you. I saw you at Union County College. You gave us like a seminar there too. I'm still on the road, but I can tell you something about me. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm using an accountant for my, as a a CPA accountant for my taxes and my balance sheet and my profit and loss statements and all of that. And actually, I just got one balance sheet and profit and loss statement made for me last month because the bank was requiring me to present that to them. And I was going to ask you about that, Marce. Like sometimes, I mean, you can have QuickBooks, you can have a spreadsheet, you can have Microsoft Excel, you can do your finances yourself. But at the end of the day, when I'm trying to refinance my house. So
Yes,
the bank is requiring me to have a balance sheet and profit and loss statement for my business, but it has to be audited. So
yes.
I have to hire an accountant, regardless. So I think,
So,
sometimes even though you can do your things yourself, but most of the institutions, depending on what transactions you are making with them, they require you to present audited financial statements or profit and loss statements or, balance sheet. And
so
I
I'm
have a
going to
question.
interrupt you. Arturo, let me interrupt you because this is very important that everybody has to hear this. And then you save your question because I do want to answer that question. But what
Okay.
I want to tell you is that usually when you have computer software, whether it's QuickBooks, FreshBooks, Xero, whatever computer software you use, accounting software, and you do the guiding principles and you have it all reconciled, for as a courtesy, your CPA will write a letter to your bank saying that those books are in alignment with the guiding principles of general accounting principles that will equate to audited. So by being very organized and having your books organized rather than creating manually those balance sheets of profit and loss, at the end for an activity that you want to do, it saves a lot of money. What happens, which is very challenging, is that most of the people, they need it now, now, now. They never have done the best practices or what needed to be done properly to be able to build an infrastructure that allows them to be that. So by the time they have to do it, they spend a lot of money having to have audited financial statements and hiring people to do those activities that would have been avoided had you from the very beginning started using best practices on getting your financials organized to do that. I just wanted to add that because that's very important. But tell me, what was your other question that you may have had?
My question was about the cash flow. The third part that you were explaining. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to calculate exactly how much cash do you have on your hand, like because like you have sometimes you have receipts that you're gonna have to be paying like tomorrow or in 2 weeks, and the cash that actually reflects on your bank account is not the cash that you actually have. So how do you calculate? How can you be precise about the third element that you were talking about, Marce?
So, so what happens is that if you try to do it manually, it's almost humanly impossible. If you have an accounting software, it could be QuickBooks, it could be Xero, which is Xero, it could be FreshBooks. There's so many accounting programs in the market. Although most of people here in New Jersey prefer QuickBooks because everybody's using it, but there's so many, and most of them do exactly the same thing. If you have the ability to have that, by you entering the day-to-day operations that happens in your company, automatically, by pressing one button, it's going to give you your cash flow because it's going to tell you how much money you still owe people. It's going to tell you how much money you're going to be receiving, how much is your credit card limit, has it been maxed out, like all the different places where you could get money to do something in specifically. And that to me is a very important point. Why? people need accounting softwares rather than Excel and doing things manually. Do I answer your question, Arturo?
It was Oscar.
Say that again?
Oscar, not Arturo.
Oh, Oscar, did I answer
Yeah.
your question, Oscar?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did, Marcy. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah, it is so important, but I'm telling you guys, all of you, don't react to now you want to buy a house, you want to finance this, and now you're going to have to scramble to do all this. It's very stressful, and it also is going to be even more costly had you spent consistently the money and the time that would require you to get organized properly. That
Yes.
makes sense, you know.
Yes.
It's, so
Also, Marcy, I wanted to add something else. Like, this pandemic that we're going through, there is some help that the government was giving out to businesses, but now it pays out to be organized. Actually, it paid out to be organized, to have people on payroll, to have your balance sheets, your profit and loss statements, because most of these, I think almost all of them, all of the banks that when you were submitting the applications, they were asking you for all of that information. So I have people in Plainfield around my block that they say that they couldn't take advantage of the PP loans and all of those loans because they were not organized. They don't even have a business insurance. And I think, that's why it's very important to be on these seminars, being with you, Marcia or Bertha, it's very, very important. And I really appreciate that you're doing, and I hope a lot of people can be joining all these seminars because it's very, very important. It pays out to be organized, and you're right.
yeah. And the reason I didn't want to have a PowerPoint presentation is because in 1 hour, I felt, let's have a conversation, whoever's in the audience and who's here, to be able to answer questions. I have a bookkeeping financial practices where people, we are like the employees of the people that hire us to do that. When the COVID pandemic came, anybody that wanted to apply for the first $10,000 that the government was able to provide, they got it within 2-3 days of doing that activity because they went to the website themselves or we did it for them. And then what happened? The money just was deposited directly into the bank because everything came from the financial statements. And then the people that wanted to apply for PPPs, they did it again, Oscar, because everything was organized. And you know what is most incredible about all this? That most of everything is going to be, like the government gave $10,000 for free. Nobody's going to have to pay those $10,000, the people who got that $10,000. The people that got more money, that is going to get also forgiven. But the only way all this is happening is because you had your financial records and everything recognized, organized in a way that wasn't just for taxes. It was organized for running your business, and that's how it worked. So I really appreciate what you said, Oscar, because that is so important. And either you do it yourself, you hired an employee to do it. There's many companies like mine. There's so many companies like mine that do an excellent job. And whoever you feel comfortable when you can afford them, you should hire them or, grow by learning how to do it yourself if you have the time to do it. But do it, because if you're not organized, whenever there's going to be another crisis and the world will keep shifting and having crises, that will still be something that you won't be able to recover because you didn't do what you were supposed to do. So that's kind of my my guiding principles about how to do things. And I don't know if there's anybody else that wants to ask me a last question, because I think I covered like the most important basics of why you need to organize, how you need to understand your financials. I'll send the link to Bertha so she can send it to all of you about managing by the numbers. But I think the basic of what this workshop was all about, this webinar, we have covered. But do ask, you know, we still have 7 minutes, so let's utilize them appropriately. So ask any questions you may want to ask.
I want to thank you, Marcy, because I was going to go into what Oscar talked about in terms of being organized. Not only is it easy accessibility for the reports when you have your own system, but also when something does occur, as you mentioned, in a crisis, in an emergency, anything, maybe something new, now you can also use it for, that's sometimes reactive in a crisis, but now you can use it proactively, so that you can also use your QuickBooks is what I use, or your Xero or FreshBooks. I put that in there that Marcy mentioned, Zoho Books, whatever it is that's your system, you can use it to proactively plan out. Can you share something that I know about that you said that you do? How do you use your QuickBooks also as like a mini CRM? Can you share that?
Sure. So I don't do it anymore, but when I started, first of all, does everybody, John, do you know what a CRM is? You're muted, so I don't know if you're saying yes or no.
No.
Okay. So a CRM
Yeah.
is so a CRM is a tool that it's needed to manage the people that are your clients or your prospects. It's a customer relationship tool. It's a customer relations management, or customer relation management tool. But it's a tool that it allows you to see the trends of your customers, what they're doing, how they're doing. So when you're starting your business, and if you don't have the ability to have a lot of money in buying all the tools that are required to grow a business, you could use QuickBooks as a very cumbersome type of CRM, where, for example, if I'm talking, let's say John is my customer. And so John, you're my customer. So when I'm talking to you, I open my QuickBooks, and in my QuickBooks, it says when your birthday is, what was the last conversation, because there's a place to write notes in your QuickBooks. So while I'm talking to you about what you're going to be buying from me or not, I said, oh, by the way, John, I noticed that it's your birthday. I wanted to wish you a happy birthday. Or, oh, or if I have other employees working with me, which I do this a lot, I'll say, oh, John, I noticed that my colleague so-and-so spoke to you about this. How did she do? Did she do a good job? And it's like, wow, how does she know everything? Because I'm looking at the QuickBooks and using it as a CRM tool. Did I answer the question you wanted me to answer, Bertha?
Absolutely, how you can use that tool in a few different innovative, creative ways. Because when we started this whole webinar series, we started with the business plan. We walked into the marketing plan. We talked about sales in this environment. We talked about technology and tools. And here we are now talking about this wonderful way of knowing the importance of your financials using another tool that's critical for us to manage our businesses. So thank you for including that, because you're the first one that introduced that idea to me. And it, of course, doesn't allow you to do the email management and sending out, but it's a great way to stay in touch and show customer loyalty, you know, really have outstanding customer service. That was kind of brilliant.
One question, Bertha, that CRM, it will depend on the activity that you do in your business, right? Because not everyone is going to be able to use that tool.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. So like Marcela said, it's a cumbersome if you're using it, but when you're first starting out, like I'm a solopreneur, it's a great way for me to use it. And when I'm interacting with my customer, I do have another customer relationship management system, and that allows me to do more integrative follow-up, and then also look into sales and, you know, marketing and email and touch points. But it's a great way to still stay in touch and to track your activity and interactions with the customers.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
This has been phenomenal, Marcela. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you
So-
all for coming today as
So
well.
Bertha, what I wanted to say to all of you is, I really wanted to support you for this activity because the job that you're doing in Plainfield is incredible. I wanted to tell you all the reason you're seeing in a virtual background is I'm one of the people that organize the University of Economic Development Association Annual Summit, where all the universities have been participating. So today I've been back to back in charrettes and doing awards of excellence for all the universities in the United States. But I wanted to make sure that I did not miss the beat in being able to support my dear Bertha that I like so much and that I appreciate all the work she does for small entrepreneurs. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, I want to thank you again, Marcia, for definitely sharing some of your time today. I know how very busy you are and how you also are a model of serving business owners all throughout the state and the world. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't thank the Plainfield Special Improvement District for hosting and sponsoring and marketing and getting the word out to all of the business owners in Plainfield and the surrounding areas. So thank you so much to Marcia, thank you so much to the Special Improvement District. And of course, this session wouldn't have been anything of as value without the people that came to ask your questions, the small business owners, the medium size, and some of you out there may be large businesses as well. So thank you so very much. This will be recorded as usual. I will share this, or Joelle will follow up, and also Antoinette with the community so that you'll have access to the recordings. Once I get any follow-up notes or commentary from Marcela, I will definitely share that out so that everyone has that as well. So have a wonderful evening. And any last, I saw Marcia open up and start to say something. Any last comments? They're yours.
So my last comment, Bertha, is if anybody has any questions related to the webinar that I provided today, you're welcome to give my email address and I'll be happy to answer personal questions to any of the participants who participated.
Awesome. Thank you again. Have a great night, everyone, and be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Marcelo.
Thank you, Marcia.
Information we provide.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Take care.